Welcome to the Discover Bittensor podcast. This episode is going to focus on a few subnets. I basically just want to go over them to basically show you the incredible innovation that we observe on Bittensor. And it's been a while, like a few, 10 episodes back or so, I made an episode highlighting some subnets like Hippius, I think the VPN subnet, which is no longer a VPN subnet. So yeah, I thought it's time to highlight some exciting subnets, in my opinion, for those of you who are new to Bittensor and who might not be really interested in all the technical details. Like, I made a few episodes focusing on recent upgrades, and they were pretty technical. So I thought, let's change this again. This episode is more inspiring. So I'll dive right into it. Let's start with subnet Bitcast, which is a decentralized market for attention. Bitcast is one of the easiest Bittensor subnets to explain to someone who has never heard of Bittensor before. In simple terms, Bitcast creates a decentralized marketplace for online attention. Brands want people to talk about their products, creators produce content, and Bitcast measures whether that content actually reaches and engages an audience. And creators are rewarded based on verifiable attention rather than simply being paid a fixed amount upfront. What I find particularly interesting is that Bitcast is already generating external revenue rather than relying entirely on Bittensor emissions, like 80+% or so of the other subnets. As of late August, Bitcast reports roughly $377,000 in cumulative revenue, while around $236,000 has been used to buy, its own subnet token, which means that roughly 62% of reported revenue has been recycled back into the subnet. And I also heard that they are basically offsetting all the miner emissions. So miners, the content creators, they receive the subnet token, and very often they sell, because this is basically their salary, right? So this puts pressure on the token price, and by buying the token themselves, they now offset all the miner emissions. So even if all the miners would receive tokens immediately, this process would not impact the price. Well, it impacts the price, but it's offset by what Bitcast buys. So that's pretty interesting. And there are not many subnets that have reached this point. It might be the only one or one of the only ones. And what's also very exciting is that there are more than 1,000 creators on Bitcast. And Bitcast says more than 6,500 pieces of content have been rewarded. I think this is an interesting example of what Bittensor can become beyond AI models. The network can also coordinate human economic activity. Instead of miners supplying GPUs or models, here the scarce resource is effectively human attention and distribution. And the bigger question for Bitcast is whether this can grow into a real marketing marketplace that companies use because it works better than traditional influencer marketing, rather than primarily because Bittensor is subsidizing it. So yeah, this is very exciting, and I think we really want to see some outside brands, so not Bittensor subnets, but independent brands, reaching out to Bitcast for marketing. And this is something I'm gonna monitor closely over the coming months. Then let's move on to another exciting subnet, which is called Yanez. Yanez is basically proving that you are a human without revealing who you are. And it's one of the subnets I think has a particularly interesting real-world use case. The basic problem is becoming increasingly obvious. As AI agents, bots, and deepfakes improve, simply knowing that there is an account on the other side of an internet interaction tells you very little. Yanez is building what it calls proof of humanhood and proof of uniqueness. Proof of humanhood asks, is there actually a real human here? Proof of uniqueness asks another question. Is this one unique human rather than the same person creating hundreds or thousands of accounts? And crucially, Yanez wants to prove those things without revealing the person's identity. Their architecture uses privacy-preserving cryptographic proofs, And Yanez says biometric data does not need to leave the user's device, or basically they don't leave the user's device. This is very different from traditional KYC, know your customer. A bank or a crypto exchange doesn't necessarily need to know my passport number, home address, and date of birth simply to establish that I'm a real and unique person. The important recent development is that this is no longer purely a research ID. Yanez said its proof of humanhood product went live in July and was already integrated with its first production clients. One verified example is Cyclo, where the technology has been deployed in production. And another very recent example is Diffusion AI, which is integrating Yanez as a human verification layer behind its digital twins. Diffusion has a very large contributor network, and it needs to prevent one person from creating many artificial identities and manipulating its reward system. So think about a 2FA authentication. For example, using an authenticator app or a YubiKey or a hardware key. And this application could, if it works well enough, basically replace one of those other 2FA methods, which is pretty cool. And so, in my opinion, it's really something to follow closely. And especially once AI agents start spending money on your behalf. We're in this age of AI agents, and very likely the coming years, AI agents will see a massive surge in activity and in adoption. And the problem is that there's a lot of security issues with AI agents acting semi or autonomously on our behalf. So if an AI agent makes a payment, a financial institution may eventually need cryptographic proof that a real human authorized that agent to act. And Yanez is therefore trying to build something broader than identity verification. It's trying to build a trust layer between humans, AI agents, and digital services. So, very interesting. I'm going to keep a close eye on the following metric. Are real businesses paying to use it? And are they expanding? Well, now that we're talking about basically cybersecurity, let's continue with Redteam, subnet 61. Redteam is a cybersecurity subnet, and I think the easiest way to understand is to think of the miners as competing ethical hackers. So instead of asking miners to produce the best text or image, Redteam gives them adversarial cybersecurity challenges. Miners are rewarded for discovering new ways to bypass detection systems, automate attacks, or find weaknesses. The idea is that defenders can then learn from those attacks before criminals discover the same techniques in the wild. In August, so this month, Redteam launched its bot virus challenge, where miners can run complete bot pipelines and attempt to evade detection in a live environment. But the more interesting recent announcement is much bigger than one individual challenge. InnoWorks, the company behind Redteam, has announced what it calls an immune system for cybersecurity. The ambition is to create a system that continuously generates previously unseen attack vectors and then turns those attacks into new defenses. I think of this as an attempt to build something like a collective cybersecurity brain. Traditional cybersecurity is often reactive. An attacker discovers something, the attack happens. Defenders analyze it, and then somebody builds a fix. Redteam wants to compress that cycle by having thousands of adversarial experiments happening continuously. The network attacks the defensive system itself, the defense learns, and then miners are forced to find another way around it. If that loop works, cybersecurity starts to become evolutionary. Every successful attack changes the environment, which forces the next generation of attacks to become more sophisticated. InnoWorks says Redteam's technology is already being tested through several enterprise pilots. The reported pilots collectively touch very large numbers of accounts and transactions, although I would still treat those company-reported figures as something to verify over time, rather than as a proven commercial success. Like, they implied that some of the customers are very, very big names, and most people will definitely have heard of them. Because they work in cybersecurity, they can't release all the clients' names. So for the moment, it's still a bit unclear. But I think something really interesting is going on here with the subnet. And no financial advice, but I think this subnet might really be an underdog. Like there's not so many people talking about it. A little bit more since a couple of weeks because the price has gone up quite strongly. But still, I think it's not really on many people's radar. And I think this is incorrect. So people who invest in subnets, I can really recommend you to do your own research, of course, into this subnet and form your own opinion. I think it's worth it. So let's move on to the last subnet for this episode, which is called Hippius, turning decentralized storage into something normal people can actually use. So Hippius is an old subnet on Bittensor, and it's building a decentralized cloud infrastructure. And until recently, the easiest way to think about Hippius was a decentralized alternative to infrastructure such as Amazon S3. Miners from around the world provide storage capacity, while Hippius tries to turn that distributed hardware into a reliable cloud storage service. The interesting recent development is Hippius Drive, launched in August. Hippius Drive takes the underlying decentralized storage network and packages it into something much more familiar, encrypted file storage that synchronizes across the web console, desktop and mobile. It's something that feels much closer to Dropbox or Google Drive, okay? And I think that product layer is very important, especially to onboard people from outside of Bittensor. The real test is whether the decentralization becomes invisible to the user, because to succeed, Hippius needs to have a lot of clients that don't necessarily, or actually that don't come from Bittensor. They need to be from outside our Bittensor universe. And that's not an easy job, especially when you say, hey, we have a product and basically you can store your files here. And where are my files? Are they in a data center? No, they're not. They're basically encrypted on a computer of someone we don't know, anywhere in the world. So, of course, in terms of trust, gaining a client's trust, this is not easy. This, to me, is Hippius' greatest challenge. They need to prove, and this takes time, that their storage is reliable, that the encryption works, so that no one can access your files, of course. If it works, it can become very successful, I think, because their pricing is very competitive compared to other cloud storages. But this trust question is very challenging, I think. So what I like about these 4 examples is how different they are. And also they are not these nerdy, well, they are maybe quite nerdy, but not these super complex AI model training, refinement subnets that are even harder to understand for people who are not AI native, as I like to say. So Bitcast is building a market for attention. Yanez is building infrastructure for proving that humans are real and unique. Redteam is trying to create an evolving cybersecurity system. And Hippius is building this decentralized cloud storage. None of these really look like the simplistic idea of a decentralized ChatGPT. And that is increasingly how I think newcomers should understand Bittensor. It's not one decentralized AI product. It's an economic framework in which many different networks can compete to produce useful digital services. Some of these experiments will fail. As Barry Silbert said, it's like 1993 with the internet. So there were some websites. Most of the websites that existed around 1993 are no longer there in 2026. And he thinks, and I firmly agree with him, that the same will be true for the subnets. Most of them won't be there in 5 years' time. And as the tau price gets higher and higher in the coming years, and basically miners get more rewards, and Bittensor puts itself on the map, it will attract even better subnet owners, and with more talent, more capital, maybe more better teams, etc., to build better subnets with more advanced incentive mechanisms. I think this will be a beautiful process to witness. I don't know how quick it goes. It might take longer than some people hope. I don't exclude this. But I do think that even over the last half year, you can already see a remarkable progress in the quality of at least a significant part of the subnets. I'm going to stop right here. Thank you for listening to this episode. I hope you are inspired by some of these subnets, and I invite you to check them out, do your own research, and basically get a feeling of the huge diversity of different services, subnets, things that exist within the Bittensor universe. Bye bye.